Last video, I said that I needed this steering wheel for another modification. Well, today's the day for that new modification. But first, a little insight on the mod. This is the power steering pump. Now, what a lot of people like to do is, probably because they have no money, which is totally cool up to a point, is they remove this pump and they loop the two lines. That's fine and good and everything, but you have a problem there. A hydraulic pump pumping fluid into a power steering, you're supposed to have fluid moving through it, and now there's none. You're asking for trouble, including premature wear, maybe even failure. So the correct thing to do is switch to a manual rack, like I got right here. This is a MR2, first generation MR2 rack. So the MR2 racks are identical to the AE86 manual racks. So we do have options. It's better to replace it all than to do something like that by just removing the pump and then just waiting for the failure to happen. So let's pull the pump off and let's start this. First step is pretty obvious. Take the belt off or cut it off. This belt is old, so I'm going to cut it off. And that's that. Now we're going to take the pump off. All the bolts are 14mm. Removing the pump and all the lines are the dirtiest part of the whole job. But after that, it's all downhill. Okay, there it is. Now I'm gonna disconnect the lines. I got a drop bucket underneath. And then I'm gonna turn this upside down, drain all the fluid out of it, and then I can put that aside. Okay, the power steering pump is out. Now if I wanted to, I could just move to start removing the lines, but I decided to take another step. There's the bracket for the power steering pump. This is excess weight that we no longer need, so I took it out. Now we're going to start removing the lines that go all the way underneath this. It goes all the way around to the other side of the engine. No wonder power steering sucks so much. Now, there are like many ways, different ways to get these lines out. One is to cut them all and then just get the remnants out. I decided to cut it. I decided just to cut one, and then I'm taking the rest out, in my opinion, the right way, which is just going down the line. I removed the shield, removed one bolt, and now this is ready to come out now. With that out, I'm going to put the car back together in front and then start work on removing the rack. Now, the messy stuff is done. Now we can move to the heart of the issue, the power steering rack and pinion. First thing is to remove that universal joint, but as you can see it's turned the wrong way, so I'm going to turn it the right way. Next is to remove these two bolts. I think they're 12s. And then I'm going to turn the wheel back to straight, slide that up, remove that, and then jack the car up. Now with the car up in the air and the wheels off, we have to get these things off. First I got to take the cotter pin out, take that nut off, which is called a castle nut because of the way it looks, and then drop these off. Typically you're supposed to use like special tools to get this off, but since I'm not going to be reusing these, I could really care less. Okay, both sides are out now. So now I'm going to take the actual rack off. On the driver's side there are two bolts that are holding the rack on. One is underneath, one is on top. On the other side there are two on top. Then I'm going to pull the rack out and compare the power rack with the manual rack. And here's a better way to get this thing out of here. I got a block of wood in between my jack and the subframe. I'm going to remove the subframe bolts on either side. I'm going to lower the subframe about 1.5 inches, maybe 2, and then I'll be able to have better access to those bracket bolts. You can see that the engine is really, really low. It's because I dropped the subframe. And it's out. So, let's compare. One of the biggest comparisons is, of course, that it's smaller. It's also shorter. For this being an MR2 rack, this has got 1 inch more taller than a typical AE86 manual rack. But that's the only difference, really. These are AE86 power steering inner and outer tie rods. You can pick them up and the whole thing moves. Watch when I do the exact same thing to this power steering rack. We can almost guarantee that these are original. That's pathetic. This is the passenger side mount. And as you can see, there's no way I'd be able to put that on here. T3, Techno Toy Tuning, makes this adapter bushing, which is split in half. It's made out of, I think it's called Deirdre. And it just fits on there like that. And you'll be able to use a factory bracket, power steering bracket, for your manual rack. I have aligned these so they'll be generally in the right position. I still have to get alignment later on, but this will do for now. I'm going to tighten up these little collars, and then we're going to put it in. Part 1 was very successful taking care of the rack. Part 2 is the little things that are left. Well, here's one that's not so little. I'm missing the steering column out of the car. I didn't film taking it out for a very special reason, which I will show later. Here it is right here. It's really easy to take out. What we're going to do is get this out, which is the intermediate shaft. The easiest way to do it, from what I've read, is heat this up and pull this out. So let's go. With it out, you can see that it's a hell of a lot smaller. Now the manual steering AE86 would be like maybe to here, would be a little bit longer, about to here. This is a Mark III Supra intermediate shaft, which works very, very good substitute. And since there's plenty of them around in junkyards, you should be able to source one really easy and cheaply. It also, with it being a heck of a lot longer than the AE86 manual intermediate shaft, you can almost guarantee that there'll be a heck of a lot better, a lot more strength to it, because a lot more is going into the column. So now we're going to stick this into the column. And here's the super shaft inside the column shaft of my column. Now we're going to take the whole column and put it back in the car. So you can see here, there's like a grommet type thing. Let's slide it into the grommet, and then we got 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have 4 14mm nuts. Now I dry put it in, which means I basically put it in where it's still loose. Now the best way to do it is to do it from the back first, because this back part can be tilted. There's a pivot back there. Now I'm tightening up the bottom piece. And then I have connections to make that will allow everything that's in the column to work. The horn, the turn signals, starting it, all that. And then we're going to put the bottom panel in. Make sure everything has final tightening. and then put the speaker back in, put the cover back in underneath here. We also have a piece of ductwork. You can see up here, here's where the duct comes from there, and it goes to here. And that's held on by a little Phillips head. That's it. Okay, we have all connectors connected. The one that goes under here, I believe it's for starting. Now here's the one, I don't know if you can even see it at all. Okay, this one here controls the beep. You know, when you put your key in and turn it, and you're like, your seatbelt's not on or whatever, the warning beep, that's what this is. All this is tight now. Now we're gonna put this back on, which, well, actually no. Here's the vent that goes underneath the steering column. Goes like that. And then after I put the ductwork back in, I just had to put this cover piece of the lower dash back on, which is just held on by 1, 2, 3 screws. I think they're Phillips number 2 and 2 10mm bolts. And then all we have left is this speaker grill. And then we're done in here. As you can see here, I connected the tie rods. Putting everything back together is in reverse order of when you took it off. Now for the final comparison too. If you look right here, you'll see the steering knuckle to strut casting. This is what the tie rod is connected to help you turn. The biggest difference between the power and the manual steering is the manual one is longer, and it's supposed to help, you know, steering effort. It's supposed to make it easier on the driver. Since me locating manual steering ones was kind of a hassle, I decided to stay with the power steering ones. This is what it means by increased steering angle. Of course, the car is still up in the air, so it won't be showing it as severely as if I would put it down on the ground. Now let's turn the steering wheel. Now this half is not counted because it's not turning. That's 3 turns lock to lock. If you had one of those like kits that would replace the gearing inside the rack, it could bring it down as much as 2.5 lock to lock. From this view here, it doesn't look like I did anything at all. Let's recap what I did. First, I switched to a bigger steering wheel, since the smaller one would make it harder on me to steer. Then I removed the power steering pump. And then I removed all the power steering lines. They went all the way around. And then I removed the power steering rack and the universal joint. For those of you who don't feel all that great about putting a blowtorch to your car with the column still in it, I decided to take mine out. So I took my column out so I could blowtorch the power steering yoke to get the intermediate shaft out. And then I put everything together. I put this back on to make it look factory again. I ensured that the interior rack was aligned before I put it on. The best way to do that was the rack is in fact longer than the housing. Just make sure that the part that extends out is equal on both sides, and then your rack is centered. Center that with the steering wheel. All you have to deal with is the tie rods. All that's left is an alignment. This job was really long. It's totally worth it. You get better steering feel, you get better steering angle, you get better road feel. I took it for a test drive yesterday, and I didn't really see any difference between power steering and manual steering. It just felt just like I adapted instantly. Those of you who have never tried this before or are like afraid to do anything to a car of this age, don't be. Just make sure you have really good penetrating oil and have really good directions. Some directions that are worth using are like these two magazines here. This is from 2007. Here's what it's all about. And also this one. Yes, it talks about converting an SR5 to a GTS. If you want to keep your SR5 the way it is, you can actually utilize some of the information in this book. And that would be on this page. Another thing to have, if you don't want to go through the trouble of finding those old magazines, is getting a service manual. And you've seen this service manual before in many of my videos. Without going through the reading sense, you can also go to many websites like Club 4AGE, 4AC Power. They give a lot of information on how to do it. Overall, a manual steering conversion is totally worth doing.